Tarava Cohen, Irene Nishmat, his beloved mother, Mireille, but Olga, Alea Shalom. Additionally, by Ronnie Beda, honoring his dear friend, Mr. A.B. Franco, B'ezrat Hashem, Iratzon, to the words of Torah, both of them great Yeberachah Nasaha in all their endeavors. Amen. So we'll try to continue with a topic that we began a week ago, at least to a certain extent, to discuss the concepts of Shabbat and Erev Shabbat. And B'ezrat Hashem, with your permission, I'd like to go back, thank you so much, Chazak Baruch, to one of the things that I mentioned last Friday and add a couple of halachic parameters in order to benefit from this particular halakha. So we mentioned the topic of, let me just find it here, Tosefet Shabbat. The topic of Tosefet Shabbat, we discussed it here this past few days with the Hacham Israel Bitan, the author of the Yalkut Yosef, Vekiim Ba'alacha, and others, that B'ezrat Hashem is our guest for this particular Shabbat, and take this as a personal invitation. I'm honoring the rabbi with my Shabbat afternoon class to give the class to the entire Kahal Kadosh. The rabbi speaks a very nice and enjoyable English, so it will be beneficial for everybody to come and to understand. So we ask the great rabbi, based on what we learned last week. Last week, we mentioned how the Gemara says in the name of Rabbi Yossi and Masechet Shabbat, and it says, Rabbi Yossi, I wish that I can be in Tiberias in Erev Shabbat, Friday afternoon, and in Tzipori on Mosai Shabbat. What's the particularity of these two cities? One city is in the northern part of Israel, the other one is on the southern part of Israel. That means that the sunset is closer to the north than to the south. So therefore, this way he figures, I can expand the Shabbat in a beautiful way. That is what Rabbi Yossi says in the Gemara of Shabbat. Next, we also learn, and I have it marked in front of me, in the Sefer Beni Yada, which is a Sefer written by the Ben Ishai, and also by a Sefer called Eshel Abraham by the Perem Gadim, that says, and this is the Lashon, it says, a person that expands the Shabbat on Friday afternoon and Mosai Shabbat, even though the limitation of days in this world is coming to an end, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the merit of the observance of the Shabbat, on expanding the time of the Shabbat before and after, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will add time to this person's life. The third thing that we mentioned was that a couple that has been married and regretfully was not able to bring children to the world, in the merit of adding minutes before Shabbat, adding minutes at the end of the Shabbat, and encouraging others to do the same, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will add family members to their marriage. Magnificent deal. You get benefit all around. Okay, so after I said this class, I'm giving you just the introduction based on Mahila, based on last week's class, so we understand the questions, and hopefully we'll understand the answer as well. So I received a few questions. How does the Tosefet Shabbat works? How many minutes before? How many minutes after? What happens if a person does Rabbeinu Tam, which is an important opinion in the Halakha? Actually, Hakam Rabbi Yosef writes that a person should make the effort to do Rabbeinu Tam every Mosai Shabbat. And we also learned during Aseret Yemet Teshuvah that even for the many of us that may not do Rabbeinu Tam, at least the last Shabbat of the year and the Shabbat Shuvah, the person should make the effort to do Rabbeinu Tam, which is not too complicated. But allow me now to give you some halachic guidelines to truly do it the proper way, and not forgetting the fact that we are on a winter mode now, although Florida weather is magnificent. Everybody agrees to that. Beautiful. I'm sorry to the New York audience. that may be under very cold temperatures. Faddal, we open 7 days a week. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol nihiya bidbaro. Now, I'm going to start throwing a couple of ideas for us to understand how the system works. First of all, our Hachamim gave us a suggested time for candle lighting for the wonderful ladies. 18 minutes is the average. That is what it says. That's what I believe what everybody follows. Interesting enough that if you look in certain calendars from Israel, when it comes to the candlelight time, it gives you two options. 40 minutes before sunset, sure. Minhag Yerushalayim, 40 minutes, of course. Or 18 minutes. Hacham Rabbi Yosef doesn't demand, so to speak. He's stronger on the Rabbeinu Tam to do it extra Mosai Shabbat than following the 40 minutes. He says, halachically, there is no need to do it. 18 minutes is wonderful, etc. And obviously, the reason why these minutes are given is to create a gather. What gather? That a person may not say, oh, you know what? I have a few minutes before. I'm going to delay. I'm going to do things. I'm going to get caught up. And then every person will be welcoming Shabbat at a different times. And most likely, I don't want to say the word guaranteed, God forbid, but most likely, that's a better word of saying, that some may light the candles at a border time, problematic time, that in that case, after sunset, you should not light the candles. That is basic halachic parameters. In Eretz Israel, and especially in the city of Yerushalayim, Sephardic and Ashkenazic synagogues, they have a very peculiar tradition, which is magnificent for the topic of Tosefet Shabbat. First, many communities or many synagogues in Israel do not offer Seudah Shlishit at the synagogues like we do outside of Israel. In America, South America, most of the communities that we know and we're familiar with, the Knis provides Seudah Shlishit. People come to learn, Mincha, Seudah Shlishit, Arvit, Avdalah, etc. That is the majority of the protocol outside of Israel. That's number one. In Israel, the system is a bit different. In many synagogues in Israel, what they do, to benefit from the Tosefet Shabbat, they do Arvit. They begin Arvit by the time Shabbat is ending. So therefore, when they say in the Amidah, Atah Honantanu, which is the first stage of the Havdalah, in the beginning of the Amidah, that is when Shabbat officially finishes. So what they do, they gain, if you calculate, they started Arvit after Tzeta Kochavim, or right by Tzeta Kochavim, maybe they won 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes, depends on the cantorial effect of the prayers, how many minutes they will get in order to benefit from the Tosefet Shabbat. That is one aspect. But let's go to Friday afternoon. When does the Tosefet Shabbat clock timer starts? So it all depends on the community schedule in part, and also the mahashava of the person. There is a mahloket in the halacha, the way I understand, between the Ben Ish Hai and Hacham Obadiah Yosef. The Ben Ish Hai holds that in order for the bonus minutes of Friday afternoon be counted as welcoming Shabbat earlier, the person must say, I take upon myself, or the person should say, Bo netze likrat kala, boy kala, Shabbat malketa. The Ben Ish Hai brings it down, interesting enough, in this Parashat Vayera, and I believe the Lashon is Hayav, is a mandatory requirement to add a few extra minutes before Shabbat. Now, some Hacham Obadiah says, no, there is no need to verbalize that. Just take upon yourself. The minute I walk into the synagogue, maybe you came driving from the home to the synagogue, and you're going to drive back on Mosai Shabbat, according to Hakam Rabbi Yosef, you can just put in your mind, the moment I walk into the synagogue, I am technically in Shabbat mode. And your question will be, hold on, what about Minha? I didn't do Minha. I didn't do Shira Shirim. Shira Shirim is not an issue because you can do Shira Shirim after Kabbalat Shabbat. But what about Minha? The short answer is two different components in the halacha. I'm putting myself in Shabbat mode, but that doesn't mean that I cannot do Minha. But it does mean that I cannot do a melacha. Once I put my mind Shabbat mode, I cannot go to the office and print out the Yortzeit lists for Shabbat. I can ask someone who did not receive Shabbat, can you please go to the office and print this paper for me that I needed? That is permissible. But once I take upon myself, I'm on Shabbat mode, technically I'm on Shabbat mode to get the bonus minutes, but I'm not on Shabbat mode not to be able to do Minha. But that brings another halacha. People that come late to the synagogue. I don't believe that anybody here comes late, but just in case a person comes in late, what happens? The kahal is saying, Lecha dodi likrat kala. If you go to Ashkenazic synagogue, Lecha dodi likrat. I know the songs. Okay, I know the songs. Okay, what is the halacha? You cannot do mincha in that room. You got to pray outside because you're causing a short circuit to the entire minyan. The entire minyan is singing and praying Shabbat prayers, and you say, hey guys, I'm here, let me do mincha. No, pray outside. That is certain halachot that apply on a regular basis. So what do we understand from this? A concept of the Tosefet Shabbat, it needs to have some kind of mental preparation. After we review this halachot, so now I learned that this is what I need to do. When I come to the synagogue, I need, in my case, again, because if you come to the synagogue, for example, you don't have to go to the office and print out the Yortzeit list. That's something that applies to the Mesader, applies to me, Haim Tovim, somebody who is involved in the day-to-day matters of the synagogue, etc. So basically, I need to prepare myself before Shabbat properly, that I have what I need for Shabbat. So this way, when I come in to pray, and the reason why I say I come in to pray, because I want to use the elevator, and I want to press the button. And there is a possibility that somebody will see me and will give me a ride to the synagogue. So in order to avoid all this, in my brain, in my mind, the way it will work for me is make sure that I don't have to do nothing prohibited once I come to the synagogue, number one. Number two, make sure that I only activate that mindset once I enter the building. As I said before, what if I want to drive before Shabbat? What if I will use the elevator and press the button? What if somebody's going to give me a ride? For all of the above reasons, I have in my mind, the moment that I walk into the lobby of the synagogue, my timer starts working. So when Shabbat comes, I'm going to say Lecha Dodi, I already have 30 minutes bonus round of Tosefet Shabbat. But if you don't have this thought, and you just walk into the synagogue before Kabbalat Shabbat, you miss the boat. Usually, at least that's what we do in our synagogue, and I believe that many other synagogues in the world do the same thing, that Lecha Dodi, Mizmor David, Avul Hashem Bnei Elim, etc., is calculated to usually start 2 or 3 minutes before sunset, before Shekiah. That everybody agrees and understands that when the sunset arrives, automatically we are on Shabbat mode. I believe that this gives a very clear, I believe so, I hope so, B'ezrat Hashem, but I still did not discuss one point. What happens in Mosai Shabbat? A person who does Rabbeinu Tam. So let's clarify. we're not going to discuss what is the shita of Rabbeinu Tam. Basically, but for Rabbeinu Tam, the real sunset is not when the sun starts dissipating and starting getting a bit dark. According to Rabbeinu Tam, that transition is a discrepancy of 30 minutes between our Seta Kochavim, the standard, or the extra Seta Kochavim, when the sun is literally missing in action, you don't see anything. So what is the concept with Tosefet Shabbat? I will say something that may not sound very popular, but it needs to be said. The Tosefet Shabbat is only activated up to the moment that we say Ata Honantano. Once we say Ata Honantano, the 30 extra minutes of Rabbeinu Tam is to abstain of doing work. But technically, I'm already on Mosai Shabbat the moment that I say Ata Honantano. That's the reason why if a person prays in something that I call with love, express minyan. Even in our synagogue, we have two options, express minyan, regular minyan. What's the difference? If you pray in the express minyan, the possibilities that you're going to get extra minutes for Tosefet Shabbat are almost non-existent because they pray and they want to finish when they need to finish. When we pray in the main shul, what do we gain? First, the tefillah is a bit slower, and usually by the time we're going to do Ata Honantanu, we are already 1 or 2 minutes after the official Shabbat ended. So we gain 2 minutes. So in this case, let's say we get, I'm bringing a fictitious number, 5 minutes Saturday night, 30 minutes Friday afternoon. How much is that? 35 minutes a week times 4, that's 2 hours. Times a month, that's 2 hours and change. Times a year, 52 hours. So you gain at least a Shabbat and a half. It's a bit less than 52 hours. So at the end of the year, what did I gain? I have an extra Shabbat and a half in my account. He doesn't have it. He doesn't have it. Why not they don't have it? I know, because they always run away and they always walk in without thinking. That's the Tosefet Shabbat. With all this in mind, now we understand what the Halacha, what the Gemara writes in the name of Rabbi Yossi, in the name of the Eshel Abraham of the Peri Megadim, and now we understand the Mishpat Tzedek says, you added time, Hashem gives you added members to the family. Magnificent, magnificent, magnificent. Anybody has further question, please ask your LOR, your local Orthodox rabbi, and I'm sure that they will be able to guide you accordingly. Okay, so the Mahzor Bitri, which is it's a book, and the Megale Sefonot, a very deep Kabbalistic book, says a very interesting concept talking about the honors of the Shabbat. And it says as follows: a person that observes the Shabbat, the honoring of the Shabbat usually is with food, with garments, etc. Now we're talking about Shemirat Shabbat, a person that observes the Shabbat properly, Kedad Bekahalacha. He follows the writing of the halacha. Sometimes people make up their own halachot. You can do this on Shabbat, you can do this on Shabbat. Not everything that people do necessarily means that it's permissible to do on Shabbat. We need to remember also that on Shabbat, besides the halachic parameter of the labor, there are certain things that on Shabbat are not in the spirit of the Shabbat. You can call it Obdin Dehol, you can call it, it's a more of a weekday matter than Shabbat. You can call it Ziluta de Shabbat. It's not respectful for the day of the Shabbat. There are many words in the Halacha that discusses, but it says that even if a person has v'shalom, based on their mazal, let's call it, they perhaps would have been recipients of hardships throughout their lifetime, the zechut of the Shabbat removes those decrees and activates a tremendous amount of blessing and protection to the person. Which brings me to this week's Parashat, Parashat Vayera. In Parashat Vayera, the Ben Ish Chai discusses the topic of Boi Kala, Boi Kala, Boi Kala, Shabbat Malketa. There are 3 times in the Lechadodi that we say Boi Kala. The first one, you turn to the right, Boi Kala. The second one, you turn to the left, Boi Kala. Both of them are being said, are being heard, are being sung. But there is a third Boi Kala that is said quietly. The third one towards the center is Boi Kala Shabbat Malketa, and then you turn on your right back to the east. When we say the Lechadodi, Mizmor LeDavid, Boi Beshalom, we turn to the west. It's like a bride is coming into the synagogue, and obviously what happens when the bride comes in? Everybody stands up, everybody looks, etc. Beautiful. Says the Ben Ish Chai, in this week's Torah portion, why is there a need to recite 3 times Boi Kala, Boi Kala? He says very simple, because every time we say Boi Kala, we are activating a prayer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by telling God 3 things. We're telling God with this motion and this prayer 3 things. Number 1, there are 3 concepts which are applicable to the concept of observing the Shabbat. One is called Mahashava, Dibur, Maaseh. Mahashava means the thought. Dibur is the speech. Maaseh is the action. In every one of these 3 words, there are parameters what can or I cannot do on Shabbat. For example, on Shabbat, I cannot turn on the light. On Shabbat, I cannot use a cell phone. On Shabbat, I cannot drive a car. Everybody knows the basic restrictions. Pardon. Then we have Dibur. On Shabbat, on the Shabbat table, I cannot talk about business. For example, Hol, Divrei Hol is called. Mundane matters. You want to talk about business? Magnificent, not on Shabbat. You want to talk about investments? Hazak Baruch, not on Shabbat. So we asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, help me that my actions are not against the holiness of the Shabbat. That's the first Boi Kala. The second Boi Kala is, God, please help me that what I speak on Shabbat is not against the holiness of the Shabbat. And then we have the third one. God help me that even on my mind, even on my brain, my thoughts are suitable and holy for the day of the Shabbat. Which begs the next question. Why, when it comes to the Lechadodi, Boi Kala, Shabbat Malketa, the one in the middle, we say it quietly? If you look at the Siturim, they will tell you, Belahash, say it quietly. Why quietly? Why the one connected to actions, I say, Boi Kala? Why the one said to the words, to the speech, I say Boi Kala, and the center one, Halacha says, Belahash. Short answer. Actions carry a voice. Maybe it's a silent voice, but if I do something, you see me that I'm doing something. If I say something, you hear that I said something. But when it comes to my thought, you don't know what's in my brain. I'm talking to you now, and I'm saying to myself, Yosef, don't go over time. Yosef, talking to myself internally, don't go over time. It's Erev Shabbat. Shabbat is early. Already your wife told you, make sure to come early enough. And by all Shabbat is almost 5 o'clock. But imagine in Brooklyn that Shabbat is at 4 o'clock. Sometimes could be even earlier. But nobody knows that I'm thinking on this unless I told you. So therefore it says the Ben Ish Chai, since the thought is silent, so the saying is silent. And because when I speak, you hear me, so then I say boy kala in a loud voice. And because the action, it's like words, it's like talking, and therefore I listen and I say it loud. But the third one, I say it quietly. Why? Because nobody knows or can listen to my thoughts unless Akadosh Baruch Hu. I think it's magnificent what the Ben Ish Chai said concerning matters that we do them. It's not like we don't do them. We do them. But now we understand why we do them. I don't know how many people say the third one, but all Sidurim bring it, Belahash, say the third one on a quiet way. Further, Gemara in Shabbat, Sefer Haredim says, a person wants to do teshubah. At the end of the day, what the Torah wants from us, to become the best that we can. And the Torah also understands that we are humans and we're going to have hiccups, different moments of life, different type of hiccups. Hiccups in this case means obviously a spiritual setback, and the person wants to do better. So the Gemara already mentioned that a person who committed the sin of idolatry, yani idolatry, not that one day ate without saying a blessing, the sin of idolatry, bow down to an idol, a statue, etc. The Gemara writes, a person wants to make a U-turn, a person wants to do teshuvah, the mitzvah that atones for the sin of idolatry or other serious sins in our Torah way of life, Shabbat is the multivitamin that can reverse the spiritual consequences of the sins committed. Because remember one thing that we have learned in the past, every time I do a mitzvah, my neshama shines, my neshama is happy, my neshama is pure, it's white, it's elegant. God forbid, every sin I commit, so then a stain of coffee fall on my shirt. Sometimes the stain is not coffee, sometimes the stain is ketchup, sometimes the stain could be grease. And every different color and the density of the stain can determine, oh, forget about it, I cannot clean it. If a drop of coffee falls on my shirt, what do? I go to the sink, take cold water, rub it in, chalas. That's a small avon to do teshuvah. But if God forbid the stain is heavy, I need to do heavier teshuvah. And one of the benefits is the concept of Shemirat Shabbat. Also, Rabbi Sadok Kohen says there are times that people are desperate for materialistic aspects of life. They never happy. They want what somebody else has. The other day somebody told me something and he started to complain against someone. And he said, yeah, look at him, he's driving a BMW. That's what the complaint was. I said, I don't think he drives a BMW. So how do you know? Because I see him driving to the synagogue back and forth. And I think that he has a different car. And he says, please check it out. I checked it out and I was right. Drives a clean, comfortable type of car, not high-end luxury, etc. But there are people, God forbid, that if it does not have a luxury tag, it's not good enough for them. I know, but there are people in the world, maybe you and I don't care so much, okay? But there are people out there that if it doesn't have a certain label, certain tag, a certain value, it's not good enough. Okay, that's a very challenging scenario to deal with. So it says the following. Now this person recognizes that living the lifestyle of the rich and famous when you don't have it can create a huge financial disaster in the life, in their marriage, even in the parenting of the children. So then what do? What type of spiritual rehab, let's call it, or spiritual therapy can a person do in order to remove that desire and wants? So it says, one suggestion that we already do it, but now we need to upgrade it. So it says a person who wants to detach themselves from the luxurious demands or expectation that a person puts upon themselves. Again, there is nothing wrong to live comfortable. There is nothing wrong to have a nice suit, a nice tie. Okay, I wear suits and ties every day. Okay, I'm not the example. But let's say a person feels that is high maintenance. And I hope that nobody takes it the wrong way what I just said. But there are people who rather be in debt and look XYZ than being normal and perhaps doing the middle of the road. So it says you want to get the spiritual strength to exercise self-control in this matter and have better money management and live within your means. It says reinforce yourself in the Shemirat Shabbat. Because Shemirat Shabbat, at the end of the day, what makes the Shemirat Shabbat special? Short answer, our bonding with God. Shemirat Shabbat means I believe that God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day, God rested. Shabbat is the gift to the Jewish people. It's an oath, the Pasuk says. Beni o ben Bnei Israel, oath hi le'olam. It's a covenant that God made with Am Israel. So if I'm connected with God, by default, my spirituality, my parameter, my thermometer of holiness and godliness will be better than if I'm only connected with materialism, that you're never happy. The Gemara guarantees and says, in materialistic manner, a person usually is not happy. He has 100, he wants 2. He has 2, he wants 4. He has 4, I want 8. 8, 16. 16, 32. 32, 1 for 64. 64, 1 44, etc. And so, En Adam met behasita avotav beyado. I believe it's a Gemara that says a person comes to the world, lives throughout life, leaves the world, and 50% of their wants and desires were not achieved. You know why? Because you never put a stop sign. You were going without a break. You got something, you barely had the chance to Apple phones. I'm sorry, Apple. Why they sell? Because they're bamboozling you. No. 15 is not good enough. 16, forget about it. You need to have 17. And they tell you, if you don't have 17, you're an old-fashioned guy. If you go to our kollel, most of the students have a flip phone. Okay? What is our thought when somebody has a flip phone? How can they live? They're not connected. They are missing YouTube, TikTok, websites, whatever thing. And the opposite, social media and technology is, like somebody said in today's class in the morning, regretfully, we are becoming people without patience. Because now we're getting accustomed. I'm not happy with Amazon Prime Day. I want same day delivery. I want overnight delivery. And I'm willing to pay the $2.99, the $4.99 fee, as long as I have it tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm not saying that it's not a good service. There are situations that a person may need. It happened to me the other day. I needed to go out of town, going back several months ago, and I realized that I did not have a third luggage. I did not have a third luggage, and I needed a third luggage. So what did I do? I went to Walmart.com. I placed an order 11 o'clock at night. By 6 o'clock in the morning, the luggage was in my home. At 11 o'clock in the morning, I was on the way to JFK with the third luggage that I needed to take. How did I do that? No, because Baruch Hashem, Walmart.com is open. But there are people that are constantly desperate. Cyber deals. Okay, they give you online all kinds of deals. And that's the reason why stores are closing and bank branches are closing. I read an article the other day. I think one of the banks are closing close to 50 branches in Florida. Say for what? We barely have pedestrian traffic into the bank. Yeah, you have people, but doesn't justify a $40,000 a month rent and having 25 employees for 10 people that come in the day. Most of us do online banking. You can deposit checks in your online banking. You don't have to go to the bank, right, Freddie? That's how the technology today. So all these wonderful services may make our life good to a certain convenient concept, but may not be necessarily what humanity needs to have: a bit of human touch, a bit of human interaction, and a spiritual interaction, which is what the Bisadoka Cohen writes on the Zechut, that the Shabbat can tone down the desperation, the desire that a person has for materialistic matters. We're not talking about day-to-day living, because you need to live. You are human, you need to live. You're not a malach. You may be, but I'm not. So we are humans. But there is a thing of being human or just not being happy and believing that because I have more brand names or more materialistic matters, I'm going to become happier. No, the happiness can come with health, with happiness, with family, and obviously a godly matter. And therefore, the Pesikta Rabbah says one more thing. Many times, people ask for things. Hashem, send me this. Hashem, send me that. Beautiful. Don't stop doing it. Pray. But it says you want a formula that can expedite your request. I want my request to be put on the expedite file. I don't want to be bumper to bumper traffic. There are 3 million people praying for things. Okay, get online. I want to go on the express lane. That's why I have TSA, and you have global entry, and you have a sun pass. Look at me. All of the above, what they have in common? Expedite. I'm going to sit in immigration for 2.5 hours. I want global entry. It helps. It helps tremendously, because sometimes the lines are excessively long, etc. I'm usually on a tight schedule for many reasons, but let me tell you what it says in the Pesikta de Rav Kahana. It says as follows. Number one, enjoy the Shabbat. Enjoy the Shabbat. Leitaneg v'ta'anugim. Enjoy the Shabbat. And there are many ways that a person enjoys the Shabbat: food, synagogue, praying, learning, proper dress code, elegance, family times, etc. But you know what is the final, the cherry on the top? It says, be happy on Shabbat. Regretfully, there are people that when Shabbat comes, they look at it as, cannot do anything. Sure, if you're going to stay home alone, you're going to be bored. Come to the shul, come to pray, come to a Torah class, hang around for the kiddush that we have every week. Shabbat Shilishit. Sit down, you'll see how Shabbat takes a whole new dimension. Now, so where do we learn that Shabbat, happiness of the Shabbat, is part of the Shabbat celebration? I can go through the songbook and pinpoint the happiness on Shabbat, but I'm going to tell you 2 words. In the Amidah we say, Ismehu b'malchutach, Shomrei Shabbat b'korei oneg, Ismehu b'malchutach. The other one says what? Ismach Moshe b'matenat chelko, ki even ne'eman karata lo. So these 2 verses, which are part of the Amidah of the Shabbat, it talks about happiness. Not only Yom Tov, that is Zeman Simchatenu, Besamachta v'chagecha, Be'itach Sameach. Even the Shabbat itself. You know why? Because the Shabbat is an opportunity to disconnect in order to connect. And I said this in one of the daily classes upstairs, that personally for me, the Shabbat is the day that I can learn and read without interruption. I don't have my cell phone. I don't have appointments. I'm at home reading, chilling in a good way, having a coffee, calmado, etc. I'll go one more perhaps, and it says, Masechet Shabbat, also the person who honors the Shabbat, vehidur means you really enhance the Shabbat. You really make the effort to make the Shabbat a holier day than the rest of the week. You honor the Shabbat. The Gemara writes, B'ma'achal, with the food. Many of Shabbat is different than the weekday. Levush, with the way we dress on Shabbat, different than the weekday. Behiluch, walking on the Shabbat, the learning of the Shabbat, the prayer of the Shabbat, there will be a shower of blessing that follows the person. And then he says one more things, and this will finish. How to remove darkness from the life of the person. When I mean darkness, I don't mean physical darkness. I mean the dark spotlights of our life. So it says as follows: a person that is cautious in observing the Shabbat without thinking of matters connected to the work weekday, and on top of that puts a separation in his heart to celebrate and to honor and to be happy on Shabbat. It says the Lashon, do not worry about any type of suffering or struggle, and all your negative decrees will be nullified and completely cancelled, because the zechut of the Shabbat creates that reaction. That is the great Rabbi Pinchas of Koritz in his Sefer Kol Taharat HaKodesh, the book of personal spiritual holiness and godliness. So all the messages that we quoted today with the Tosefet Shabbat, with the Boi Kala, with this last beautiful insights, they all come to the same conclusion. The Shabbat is the fountain of our blessing, which is something that we say every Shabbat night. Shamor bezachor bedibur echad, ki hi mekor haberacha. In the Lechado, don't we say all these paragraphs? In the middle we say, ki hi mekor haberacha, likrat Shabbat lechu benelcha. All these beautiful sentences written by the great Rabbi Shlomo Levi Al-Kabetz, they all talk about the holiness of the Shabbat. And this pasuk that I just quoted, ki hi mekor haberacha, is the foundation of the beracha, the way the Zohar writes about the manna, the man that used to come down every day of the week except Shabbat. On Friday will be double. If anyone saved during the weekday for the next day, the man will become unedible and spoiled. But Friday, the portions were double, and you were able to keep it for the next day. Why? Because the Shabbat protected the man. That's what we say in our Shabbat prayers. Beshameru bnei Israel et Shabbat. It's not so much how the Jewish people observe the Shabbat. That's hence the language of the Gemara is Shomer Shabbat. But Shomer also means a guardian. So he says that not only the Jewish people guard the Shabbat, observe the Shabbat, but the Shabbat Kodesh also protects Am Israel. Okay, my good friends, Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen. Rabbi Hananiah ben Akashi Omer, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל לפיכך.